Good evening, and welcome to Thriving Thursday. On this evening, we have Miss Noel. She's going to speak to us about grief, the different types of grief, how to get over grief, and we're going to give her a chance to introduce herself to our audience.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Hello, everyone. My name is Noel Ginyard, and I am from Bridgeport, Connecticut. It's 8 o'clock my time. I'm not sure where those of you out there are watching from or what time zone you're in, but I'm in the Eastern time zone, so it's 8:01 right now in my time zone. I was delighted when I got the invitation to be a part of Thriving Thursdays. Let me just say, and I will probably repeat this throughout my presentation tonight, I am not a licensed professional in this area. The ladies were far too kind to put the word expert on the flyer. I am humbled by that. I do consider myself to have extensive expertise in this area. However, do I wish I didn't? Of course, I wish I did not, because my expertise is experience based. I lost my beloved father. I lost my champion suddenly on December 19th, 2018. My father was the greatest man to walk this earth, and he loved teaching and preaching. He was a tremendous preacher and teacher and orator. And one of the things that he loved so much was to be able to pour into people. He loved to share his knowledge and share what God had given him with others. And so, in honor of him, I began a YouTube channel called Grief Talks with Noel. And in that channel, I just kind of share my personal experiences, and I share what God has given me regarding grief and coping with the grieving process. So again, I'm not a licensed professional, but experience sometimes is the best teacher. And I have lived through this thing for the past a little bit over 2 years now. And I live it every day. And God has given me a divine calling, a divine curriculum, and a divine plan for how to best serve those who are hurting and brokenhearted. I'm an empath, meaning I have the ability to feel what people are feeling. And I have a burden for the brokenhearted and the grieving. So that's where my expertise comes from the Lord. It's not, I did not go to school for this. I went to school for something else. You can ask me later if you want to know what it is. But it's experience based. I live this thing every day, and God has really given me a well-crafted, very thorough calling, curriculum, and plan for how to best serve the brokenhearted, and in so doing, serving myself as well as I trudge through this thing called grief. You want me to keep going? Or is that my
Amen.
intro?
Thank you for your
Okay, thank
introduction.
you.
Andrea invited us both on. I'm her co-host, Fabianna. Of course, a little bit about myself as well. I've been helping her host for some months now, and I thank God for the open opportunity because I have learned a lot myself. So again, we welcome you, Noel, and we can't wait to hear what you have in store for us. So grief, we know death is one part. Tell us the many types of grief.
Okay. The many types of grief. First, I'll start off by defining grief, if that's okay. I um I came up with my own definition of grief based on what I've been learning, what I've been living. Like I said, every single day I live this thing. And just first, let me just rewind a little bit and just touch on the concept of overcoming grief. I feel as though that is not really possible to do. In that, I feel that grief is something that you do not ever fully get over. Let me explain. I define grief as the painful process of trying to put your life back together after loss. It is like you're sweeping up the broken pieces. Like imagine like a big vase has broken in the room, and you are walking through the room barefoot and blindfolded, trying to clean up those pieces. So it's something that goes on for a while. And because of that, I don't feel that you ever get over it. I feel like you just learn to live with it. I don't want to get over losing my father. I want to grieve. I want to feel. I want to constantly adjust to his absence, because the longer I'm doing that, the more I'm actually acknowledging that he was present. If I get to a point in life where I just go through life and I'm not even fazed by his absence anymore, it's almost like I'm saying he was never there. And that's nothing I ever want to be able to say. So again, I'll define it again. To me, grief is the painful, asphyxiating, horrible process of trying to put your life back together, trying to move forward after loss, trying to figure it all out. And that is something that goes on. So because it never stops, you never stop trying to figure it out because you had a certain way that you thought your life was going to go. And undoubtedly that included your loved one. And now they're not here anymore, unfortunately. So now you've got to rewire all the plans that you had. And that constant rewiring every single day. Maybe they were a part of your everyday life. Maybe they picked your children up from school. Now you got to rewire all that. You got special events coming up in your life, and they're not going to unfortunately be there physically for those things. It's the rewiring, the constant rewiring of your life after loss. You've been hit, you've been devastated by the loss of your loved one. And now you've got to figure out, how do I put my life back together after they're gone? And the painful process, that painful process is grief, the sweeping up the pieces, the reorganizing, the restructuring, the rewiring of everything. That is grief. And so because it never stops, that process never stops, I feel as though grief never stops. You learn to manage it. You learn to live with it, to live with the handicap, so to speak. So it's not everything that you ever get over. It's something that you learn to manage and you learn to cope with. So that's my perspective on it. I don't feel that overcoming it in the classic sense is something that is really something that I want to do. And I'm glad that this is the title of this, because I'm happy to address this from my perspective. So overcoming it is not anything that I personally want to do, because I never want to get over. I never want to overcome the loss of my father. But instead, I'm learning every single day how to cope with it, how to manage it, how to kind of walk in the room with the broken glass. I'm learning where the broken glass pieces are now. I'm blindfolded in the dark, but I'm learning how to navigate, and not necessarily, or if I cut my foot on the glass one time, so the second time I cut my foot, I know what to expect. That's what happens. It never gets easier, because the opposite of easy is hard, and it's always going to be hard. So it never gets easier, but in time it gets better, because you learn what you can handle, you learn how to cope with things, you learn your triggers, you learn what to do and what not to do. So overcoming grief, in my humble opinion, is not something that can be done. And if you do it, you're in denial. And I'll talk about that when I get to the stages of grief. So if you're able to completely suppress what you're feeling, then that's a whole other thing called denial. As I said, I'll address that in a second. But overcoming grief is not something that I want to do, or that I recommend anyone do per se. I recommend that you learn how to cope with it, how to deal with it. You learn tools that will help you manage the pain of grief that never ends. I don't even know if I answered the question. That was the first part. Okay. So the question was,
That gave us a different perspective of
okay.
grief. I've never experienced a loss of a parent,
Mhm. I
but
hope you
an
never do.
uncle that I was very close to. He was like a big brother. We lived next door to each other, and we all sang. I had a gospel group. He had a gospel group. We all were a part of Gospel Music Workshops of America. We all traveled all over the world together. And all of a sudden, he got congestive heart failure and went to the doctor's office to be seen, got up to go to the restroom, and died instantly.
Oh my Lord.
So that was my hardest loss. Because like I said, we were two peas in a pod. We sung on the choir together. I was over the choir for 14 years. He had his own gospel group. We traveled for like 4 years straight. And when he got sick, I cooked him breakfast and lunch every day. And then my aunt will take over dinner. We're such a close knit family, and I just can't understand. It's not for me to understand right now, but I can just think of how it would feel if I lost my father, because me and my father are close and we're praying partners. So my heart goes out to you. My prayers go out to you as well.
Thank you.
We're going to go to the next question. Types of grief, and you can break that down to us for us.
Okay. Types of grief. So before, I was touching on what I feel is a misconception, that people feel that they get over it and something's wrong with you if you're still struggling, or if you are struggling with the loss of a loved one. And I'll just backtrack, and I'm probably going to repeat this a lot tonight. Life as you knew it functioned one way. You are used to life a certain way. You had a certain way of doing things. You had a schema, a concept of what life was like. And then all of a sudden, it's over. And so now that it's over, you've got to rewire everything. You've got to restructure everything. And that is difficult to do. It is really, really hard to do. And I think people sometimes feel that it's a display of weakness to suggest or to say that they are having a hard time dealing with the loss of their loved one. Of course they are. Of course you're hurting because you lost a loved one. You lost a major part of your existence. Your whole world as you knew it has come crashing to the ground. And so figuring that out takes time. And I think that people think like, oh, I'm still crying. I'm still doing this. I'm not supposed to be doing this anymore. I'm not supposed to be heartbroken anymore. That is not true. So I want to, if I do nothing else tonight, I want to help dispel the fact that grief is not something that really that ends. It just changes over time. You learn how to deal with it. You learn how to live with it. And there's nothing wrong with you. Hear me. There's nothing wrong with you for feeling the pain that is associated with losing a loved one. If you don't feel it, that's a problem. If you suppress it, that's a problem because you will explode later at the worst time ever, probably. So types of grief, I don't know that I would say that there are types, there are stages, and that's another question that you had for me tonight. So I can get to that in a minute. But types of grief, I would just say that there are, I wouldn't necessarily say types, I'd say that there are different ways that people are affected by grief. And in my channel, again, God has given me, I have 25 episodes on that channel. It's called Grief Talks with Noel, and it's a grief support channel that I created for you. I created it for me. I created it for all of us that are hurting. And in each episode, I touch on a different topic related to grief, and I give it real life application. I share personal stories, and I tell you how I dealt with various things and how painful those things were for me and still are for me. And it's real. I cry. Sometimes I'm snotting. You might be crying with me as you watch it. Good. Crying is good as well. I'll allude to that later. But I think that there are different ways that people handle grief. And I allude to that in episode 13. It's called Angles. In that episode, I talk about the various ways that people are affected by grief, the various angles at which people are impacted by grief. So I think that because it really depends on the dynamic that you have with the person that you lost. So my sister, you mentioned a little while ago, that was your uncle, I think you said, that you lost, and you were very, very close. So that's going to affect you differently than someone who wasn't as close to that person.
My uncle, yes.
Or so yes, your uncle. Okay. So me losing my father, obviously, I lived in the house with my father. So that's going to affect my every single day life. That's going to affect me differently than someone who didn't see my father every day. So it really depends on what the angle of your interaction with the person is. That has direct impact on how you process grief. Even if you're a child, kids grieve too. Their angle is different, their dynamic is different, and they don't understand. It's hard enough for adults to understand what happens. So-and-so is in heaven. What's heaven? You know, a child may not understand. On my end, a child may not understand what exactly that means. So again, and I have an episode for children too. Episode 16 is called For Kids, and I specifically talk to kids about grief and what the grieving process is, and what happened, and how they are allowed to feel whatever they need to feel. That's what I tell people all the time. You are perfectly allowed to feel whatever you need to feel. This is your process, and feel whatever you need to feel. So again, I wouldn't say that there's different types. There are stages. I'll get to that in the next question. But I think that there's different angles at which people are affected by grief, and it causes them to react differently. Some people might clam up. Other people might talk about it all the time. I'm sure you've seen it. People who lose loved ones, some people are spilling on Facebook. And I encourage that. I think that talking about your feelings is very, very, very good. It's far better than saying nothing. So spilling your feelings, talking about it, whatever. Who cares if people get tired? They can unfriend you or unfollow you. Let that thing out. So some people are more expressive with their grief. Some people are more private. They might talk to loved ones at home, but they may not air every single thing that they're feeling on social media, perfectly fine. As long as you're releasing it, as long as you're talking about it, that's fine. The worst thing you could possibly do is keep those feelings bottled up, keep those feelings inside, and never talk to anyone about how you're feeling. So I wouldn't say that there's different types, but I will say there's different angles at which people are affected by the loss, which causes them to react differently. In my episode 13 in angles, I talk about, I match it up with geometry, the math. And I talk about right angles. There are people that are right angle grievers. They handle it perfectly. They're always there for you. They don't walk away from you. They're right there. The tear falls and they got a tissue right there to catch it. They're right there. They know exactly what to say. Those right angle grievers. Then there are those who are the obtuse angle grievers. Obtuse angles are more than 90 degrees. They are team too much. They do way too much. They're falling out every single second you talk to them. They're crying when you're stable, bringing you down. You were feeling all right that day, and they just called you like, "Oh, I can't believe it! I can't believe your father's gone." And you're like, "Lord, I was pretty stable today. Now you're bringing me down." So the obtuse angle grievers, too much. Then there are the acute angle grievers who don't do enough. Acute angles are less than 90 degrees, and they don't do enough. They don't call you. They don't text you. They avoid you because it's too painful for them to talk to you and to be around you, because that will remind them of something they're not ready to deal with, which is the loss of your loved one. So again, different angles at which this thing hits people.
Yeah. So I have enjoyed everything you have been saying. I have really, really learned and gained a lot. I think the greatest thing about something that you said was, you don't actually stop grieving. It's not something that you have to overcome. And I think when I did the title, I was thinking about more of a certain stage of grieving that you do overcome, which is, the denial stage and some of the other stages that you'll probably talk about later on. But the I love your perspective, and where you're coming from with it. I know, and some of the things that I have started studying and some of the things that I have started reading about, with different types, there's a delayed grief, there is anticipatory grief, there is what they say as normal, common grief. They have a lot of different things. And I know one of my therapists
Mm-hmm.
was going through some of the types with me,
Mm-hmm.
and she was kind of going over how sometimes our family members grieve differently than we do. And sometimes they're more inhibited, they're more closed off, like you were discussing earlier. And sometimes it's absent. And she was saying that all of that is normal. It's a certain type of grieving. And then she also talked about an exaggerated grief that will sometimes people experience it for long periods of time, whether it be 10 to 20 to 30 years, where they're stuck in one stage of grieving. And the thing that I think I want to really, really do with this topic, which I love that you kind of have already done, is normalize grieving. I think one of the things that our culture and our people haven't done enough is introduce it to our children, introduce it to us as adults, in a way where we can actually let it be palatable and let it be a normal part of conversation and don't shun it at all. I think opening up spaces like this can open up a lot of great conversation, and it can push through the walls of where someone maybe thought, I'm going through this by myself, or I'm the only one that feels this way while grieving. And then it kind of takes that out and makes you more part of a community. Because I feel like, especially in 2020 and now in 2021, we've seen the passing of so many people, back to 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 back. What is one thing that you can say to a person right now who just, heard the news? How how would you just give them comfort that yes, it's going to feel bad. Yes, like what do you say? And what is something that people should say? Because I know a lot of times people are at a loss for words when it comes to this, and they don't know how to comfort it's real taboo. Should I call? Shouldn't I? Should I leave a message? Shouldn't I? What do you say to those people, and what should they do?
It's funny you mentioned that, Andrea, because episode 10 on my channel, it's called People Mean Well, But, and I go through different things that people say, often dumb things that people say to those who are brokenhearted because they don't know what to say. And one of those things is, if you need anything, let me know. That's the worst thing, or one of the worst things to say, because the grieving people don't know what they need at all. The mind is just not even in a place where you're ready to give a grocery list. No, you're just trying to make it literally catch your breath in a time where you feel completely asphyxiated. You cannot breathe. So what I tell people to do, first of all, I usually wait like a couple of days before I reach out to them. Unless of course they're like immediate family or something, and I jump in right away. But I kind of let people let it settle for a little bit. Like when I reached out to you, I see Crystal's on here. When I reached out to her, I kind of let it settle for a little bit. And I often tell people, I encourage them, I assure them that what they're feeling is not wrong. And I encourage them to feel whatever they need to feel. People are going to try to rush you through this thing. People are going to try to pour the Bible on you in a way that encourages you or tries to discourage you from feeling real feelings. And that's not true. Jesus himself felt grief. So I never push people to a place where where it seems wrong for them to feel what they need to feel. So that's one of the first things I say. You just lost a loved one. Oh my goodness. I am sorry. I acknowledge the hurt. Before I start quoting scriptures, I acknowledge the hurt. There's nothing wrong with that, but sometimes people quote scriptures before they even say they're sorry for the loss, before they acknowledge the pain. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy. That's not literal, first of all. Not literally 24 hours, not a night. It's a figurative period of time, meaning that eventually, you will feel better. And that's true. Anyway, I tell them, I'm so sorry for your loss. You are allowed to feel whatever you need to feel. If you need to feel angry one day, you can feel angry. If you need to feel hurt one day, you can feel hurt. If you need to lay down in the fetal position and cry that day, lay down in the fetal position and cry that day. Whatever you need to do, however you need to feel, you are allowed to feel that. And don't let anybody tell you that you're wrong for feeling the way that you need to feel. This is your process, and you've got to feel whatever you need to feel in this process. So that's what I say first to them. And then I also say, I love you and I'm praying for you. Very simply. Sometimes I'll send them a little something on Cash App. Sometimes I might send something to their house, but I don't wait for them to tell me. If you need anything, let me know. Nobody's going to contact you. Most people are not going to contact you and say, oh, we could use some chicken thighs, and we can use nobody's going to actually contact you with an actual list of things that they need. So it's good to send practical things. Money always works. If you want to be supportive to someone who lost a loved one, money always works. Bottled water, toilet tissue, gift cards, things that they will need. Even if they don't use them right there in that moment, they're gonna need to eat, and they probably don't feel like cooking. And when all the people stop and all the trays of chicken stop arriving at their houses, they're gonna still need to eat. And maybe cooking is difficult for them because it reminds them too much of the pain of the loss that they're experiencing. So send them a gift card, send them some money for a meal. A lot of people did that for us, and we were so grateful. Yeah, so that's what I say to people. You are allowed to feel what you need to feel. This is difficult. I am so sorry. I love you, and I'm praying for you. And then I actually do it. I think sometimes we just shout off stuff sometimes. We mean well, but we just like, oh, I'm praying for you. And then we may never think about it again because it's not us. This thing hits you so differently when you're in the front row of this thing, when grief is at your front door, knocking at your front door, when death is at your front door, it hits you very differently than if it's at the side door or the back door. When it's a part of your everyday life, it hits you in a whole different way. So I love you. I'm praying for you. I'm so sorry. Here's some toilet tissue or some bottled water or something that I know you'll need. A gift card, Cash App, something. Send them a little card in the mail. Flowers are all right, but that they're gonna just die, and they're gonna smell up the house when they're dying, and there are a lot to take care of. Plants are better because at least they see that and they can take care of it, and it can we have one of the plants from my father's homegoing, still right over there on the table. So like
Uh,
plants are good to look at, and you can see, it might help you feel like, it's a reminder of your loved one's presence. So plants are good. Flowers are going to perish. But anyway, those are just some things that you can do immediately in the moment for those that are hurting. Sometimes physical presence matters, but sometimes but it doesn't always have, you don't have to necessarily do something with someone all the time,
yeah.
So they may not feel like going anywhere. But if
Mhm.
you go to their house and you happen to just sit there with them, or maybe they
Yeah.
don't want you there, that's fine. Sometimes the thing that people need, you have to support people in the way that they need when they're grieving, when they're in the pit of their grief. And sometimes that means being absent. I
It's
had
good.
a conflict with someone during the pit of my grieving process who thought I needed him to be there with me physically all the time. And that was more stressful for me when he was present. So I had to tell this person, like, listen, today I need you to not be here. That's what I need today. So again, be sensitive to what they need. Whenever you reach out to them, and I love you. I'm praying for you. Here's something to let you know I'm thinking about you. Actually pray. Actually love them through it. Be patient with them, and yeah, those are just some tips.
Love all of everything you're saying. I can't express how everything you have
I
said
know.
has just been so on point, especially for me.
I know
I
you know,
think
girl.
because like sometimes we're different during grief. Some things that we wanted, like before when we weren't grieving, it's not the same thing we want while grieving. Crystal said that a woman's ministry literally gave my dad and I baskets of cleaning supplies, presented it so beautifully. It was a blessing. I love that. It's not, I really want to make this clear. Those things aren't little while you're grieving. They are humongous because you're dealing with so much other stuff. Like going to the store is not one of the things that you're doing. Like, okay, I got to go get cleaning supplies. Like, you're not thinking about that. So, that right there is humongous. I don't believe that is a little thing. I love that. I know during our time, we had so many things and so many people bring stuff and come by and stay. And I did not want to be around a lot of people. I did not want to be around a lot of people. However, we do have a big family and we do have a lot of people who surrounded my dad. And I know that's what he needed during that time. And when he didn't need it, we let them know it's time to go. But I think doing everything, of course, with respect and dignity and honor is so, so key during these times and these moments of grief. I'm going to let Fabianna ask you the next question, but I just had to say that was amazing. Like what you said is spot on because you don't know what to ask for.
That's good. It's a breakdown. People don't know, they don't understand um, the necessities of the house. You know they're going to need those things. Toilet tissue. I tell people all the time now, this is me. I said, some people just overstay their stay. It's 10 o'clock at night. The family want to get rest. They did all kinds of stuff. And here you still want to have a barbecue in the backyard. And it's like, these people need rest. They need rest. They're emotional. Their mind is someplace else. Their whole body is dealing with the fact that their loved one is gone. And here, you don't know when to leave. I'm the person that will tell them, okay, it's time to go. And it's not being mean. It's not being mean at all. I've seen people just literally pile up in people's houses until 10, 11, and 12 because they're thinking that they're trying to bring positivity, but a lot of times they just want to relax. They just want, their mind needs to rest a little bit. So I thank you. Sometimes people need to know what is necessary. what is not necessary because we need to let go. So, the stages of grief. Let us know what the stages of grief are.
Okay. Episode 5 on my channel. It's called Stages, Not Steps. And I go through the stages of grief. Now, depending on who the professional or who the person is, researchers, some think that there are 5 stages of grief. Some think that there are 7. Some think there's even as many as 12. So it really means like how you break it down into subsets and everything. And again, experience shapes perception. So even the professional that you referred to, Andrea, like, that was based off of that person's study and research and experience and all that. So whereas I didn't think that there were, different types of grief, that person had done different research that led them to believe otherwise. So more power to everybody. So I personally choose to zero in on the 5 stages of grief. There are some say 7, some say 9, 12, whatever, same thing. But I'm zeroing in on the compounded 5 stages of grief. And here they go. The first one is denial. Well, I'll list them. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Okay, let's break them down. So denial is the first stage of grief. That's the shock phase of grief. You cannot believe that this happened. You cannot believe. You can't wrap your head around it. Huh? No. You cannot wrap your head around the reality just yet. You're in shock. You're stunned. Nowhere near any type of comprehension about what happened. You're in a fog. So if I might refer to these, or I might parallel these with weather conditions as well. So denial is the fog phase. You're just kind of walking around, not even fully cognizant. You're not even aware of what's going on. That's denial. I cannot believe that this happened. Stage 2, anger. I am furious that this happened. I call that the darkness phase. That's when like somebody turned the lights out for real. And I am just in this dark place of fury and ire. And that's real, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's real. If you don't feel that, something's wrong. The problem is not feeling this. I am really, 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 really mad that this happened. Why is my loved one not going to be there for major life events that I have coming up? I'm mad that they're not going to be there. I'm mad that they got taken away from me for whatever reason. I'm mad that things happen this way. I'm mad I didn't get to say goodbye. I'm mad I didn't get to ask them various questions. Anger, the darkness. I am mad that this happened. Next is bargaining. That's where you start to kind of weigh things like, well, if I had spent more time with them, then they wouldn't have passed away. Or maybe there was something that I could have done. In the bargaining phase, you say to yourself, was there something else I could have done? Or I wish I had done more to prevent this from happening. You put it on yourself. You start to beat yourself up. Think of it as like almost like hail falling from the sky, just little pellets just hitting you. You start to take it personally and think, was there something else that I could have done to prevent this from happening? That's bargaining. If I had done this, this wouldn't happen. If I had gone to see him sooner, this wouldn't happen. If I hadn't made this decision, that wouldn't happen. Bargaining. Next is depression. This is when the reality of the loss starts to set in. Physically, you feel a physical heaviness, a physical weight. Think of it like haze. Like you walk out in the summer and it's like hazy, hot, and humid. That's depression. You walk out on a summer day in some climates and that thing hits you in the face and it weighs on you. That's the depression phase. I am so sad that this happened. I'm not mad right now. I am sad. This is weighing on me. This is heavy. And then finally, acceptance. I don't like it, but I accept that this happened. And I can start to see little glimpses of how I might be able to start crawling forward. The flood is over, the waters have receded, things are still muddy, but I'm starting to see now. I see a little blue in the sky, not a lot, but the sky is starting to clear. It takes a long time to get there. And in my episode 5, I talk about how these are stages, not steps. Let me clarify. Steps are sequential. Boom, 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 boom. Steps are linear. Boom, 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 boom. They go one after another. If you know someone who goes to an AA program, or if you go to an AA program, you are going through the 12 steps, one after another, after another, after another, in order. Stages, not so much. Stages are not linear. They're not sequential. You might, thank you, I see you, Andrea. You might go from one to the other and then back to that first one. You might go from denial to anger, skip bargaining, go to depression, go back to bargaining, go back to anger, go back to denial. Let me tell you, I use denial in a functional way. And I'm transparent enough to say this. When there are things that I have to get done, like church events or whatever, my father was my pastor. So dealing with church events is difficult to say the least. He loved church almost as much as he loved his family. He loved church. He lived for going to church. He loved it. When the church doors open, he was there. Events we would have as a jurisdiction, he was there all the time. So doing church events now without him, I slide, because they're stages, not steps. It's like, think of them as like almost like a water slide. You can fluidly go from one to the other. I slide back into denial. I put it in my head. I cannot focus on the fact that he's really not there, because I won't make it through the event. So I temporarily kind of slide back into denial to be functional. Am I like, is it harmful for me to do so? No, it's functional for me to do so. I know in the back of my head, I know he's not there, but I can't dwell on that. So I kind of slide into denial a little bit for functionality's sake. And then after the event is over, I can go back into wherever I was. If I was in depression that day, or if I was in anger that day, or whatever. Again, they are stages, not steps. You might go from one to the other, then back to one, then skip to four, then go back to two. And think about it in terms of a stage. Like if you're an actor, hey Crystal, if you're an actor on stage, right? So stages are built, they're like flat surfaces that are amorphous until you give them an identity. So that stage is open. It's wide open. You can be wherever you need to be on the stage, center stage, down stage, up stage, stage right, stage left. Wherever you need to be on that stage is where you are. Somebody else might be in the same stage of grief as you. We might both be in depression, but I might be in a different spot on the same stage. That's because the space is open. I hope this is making sense. The space is open for you to be and move and stand wherever you need to be in that stage of grief. It's an amorphous open stage that is that can fit you where you are in that stage, and me where I am in that stage. We're not in the same spot, but we're in the same stage. And that might be Monday. Then Wednesday, I might be back in, I don't know, anger. Whatever. Again, I wish there was a cookie cutter manual for this thing. There isn't. It really is subjective. It's based on who you are, how you're dealing with the loss, the dynamic of the loss, the impact of the loss. Is this loved one someone you saw every day? Were they a part of your everyday world? That's going to hit you a whole different way than if they weren't. So again, it's not steps. You might go from one to the other, then back to the other. You might be swimming all through these stages. There's a fluidity here, back and forth. The goal is to eventually get to acceptance. Do I feel like you stay in acceptance all the time? No. Do I feel like I've dabbled in acceptance pretty often? Yes. But that doesn't mean I don't get angry. Oh Lord. I might be in partial acceptance one day, and if something might happen to remind me that my daddy's gone. And I'll get angry all over again. Or I'll be talking to somebody about something and they'll ask me a question about him. And I think that talking about your fallen loved one is a wonderful thing to do. And I encourage you, talk about them, keep them alive in your heart and in your mind. People that don't know them will learn about them through you.
That's right.
My boyfriend and I, we both lost our fathers. And so we talk about our fathers every single day. We happen to know each other's fathers. He met my dad once many years ago. I met his dad a couple times many years ago. But we tell stories every single day. And that is because we are keeping the memories alive through talking about them. So someone might say something to me, like somebody might ask me a question that triggers a memory that was not, that I wasn't happy with the way it turned out, or I felt like my father was done dirty or whatever. And then, I'm back in anger. So these things, it's crazy. These things are stages, not steps. And it's important for those who are grieving to remember that. Don't be so hard on yourself during the hardest time in your life. Give yourself credit Did
That's
you wake
right.
up today and bathe and shower and go to work and clean your house? Congratulations. Episode 10,
Yeah.
small victories. Celebrate the
Yeah.
little things that you can do.
That's right. That's right. Oh my
Saving
goodness.
got steps. Okay.
Oh my goodness. When I tell you, you are hitting so many good points. They have really, really touched me. Um, and I wanted to touch on something that you've been saying, because grief can come in many types as well as, you go through these stages. And when I speak of types this time, I'm speaking of divorce, losing a job, um, losing a career. It's different types of loss.
Just loss.
And,
Yeah. Any loss.
and one thing that I can say is that even in those different types of loss, you do experience a lot of those stages as well. The same stages that someone is going through that is grieving a loved one or a person. It manifests the same way a lot of times. And the one thing that I love what you said was you can dabble in and out of acceptance. And for me, I feel like that's something that I have done. I've accepted my mom's passing. I think that was my first stage. I think my first stage was I accepted it. Um, I feel like I knew before I knew, because it was a while before I found out, and it was like I just knew. And because of that, I think some people felt like, okay, you're not grieving right. Okay, why are you feeling like this? Your mom just passed. She was your best friend. And and for me, I think because we had such a close connection, and because we were where we were, I didn't have like, oh, I wish I would have did, or oh, if I would have been there,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't have that, and I didn't think about it like that.
Me
I
neither.
knew I knew that it was her time. I knew that she had been planning for this moment. We had conversations about it. Um, I didn't know, it was coming the next day because I had just talked to her, but I knew that it was going to be coming because she was giving me her passwords, giving me her life insurance stuff. Like she was preparing, and I don't like looking back on it. We see that God allows, I believe, his people to grieve with another stage that I want to add. And that is basically allowing his glory to fill those empty spots of the loved one that has gone. There's so many moments where I've experienced God's glory in my grief that have been very overwhelming for me, but in a good way. And it has allowed me to come out of denial and back into the acceptance. It has allowed me to come out of anger and back into acceptance. The moment that I feel God's glory through my grief, it has been very, very, very shifting for me. And I do believe it was because of a lot of the prayers that people have prayed for me. Um, I just want to just say, I don't know if Crystal was still on here, but I think one of like a day or so after my mom passed away, like they did like a whole hour of prayer for me. And I truly believe that that time of prayer that they did and the points that they hit, because there's so much power in prayer, and it covers us through so much that we don't even know what God has shielded us from in our time of grief, because his glory was with us. And I truly believe as kingdom people that if we can get to the stage of allowing his glory to heal us in our time of grieving, it is miraculous. And it really removes you from depression to acceptance, from anger to acceptance. And when I tell you, I feel like I go in and out of acceptance depending on, of course, the day it is and what I want. Because
Definitely.
sometimes I'm like, okay, I just want to call my mama and tell her what's going on right now. But God's like, okay, you can talk to her, but she's not gonna speak back unless it's in a dream. Now she has done that, thank God. But one thing that I can say is we have learned so much from you. Um, I appreciate you coming. I know we gonna if anyone on here has a question or they want to ask something, we are going to get one more question before we get off. We do want to be respectful of your time. Um, but I just can say thank you so much for doing this, and it literally is going to be something that I'm going to archive and watch again and watch again and watch again, because I truly believe this is a groundbreaking conversation. Fabianna, you can ask the last question.
Again, as Andrea has said, we have learned so much, and it's just so much information out there, so many different steps. You can even be siblings and grieve different. And so we just thank you for giving the knowledge, and there's no better knowledge than the God given knowledge. So we thank you for everything that you have spoken to us about on tonight, about grief. Is I think we need to do a part two. Because yeah, there are different types of grief, and some people don't know what steps to take when coping. So that's our last question for tonight. How do they begin the coping process with grief?
I think that any coping process is subjective, as I said before. Any process, period, is subjective. There's no cookie cutter objective way to offer, okay, here are the standard steps of what you do. I'm going to say one of the things that I also tell people, in particular, at times that I know are going to be difficult for them, like holidays. I reach out to people, I check on them, or people reach out to me, ask me questions. Noel, how in the world did you get through the holiday season? And there were some tips that I released around November, December that I will definitely share with you, some coping tips that have been helpful to me and that have been helpful to those as well, those who I've talked to as well. Number one, and again, I'm plugging my channel, but I think that's what I'm here for. I'm plugging my channel because seriously, God has given me, there are 25 episodes on there. 25 episodes that cover different topics. I mean, anything from the importance of crying, like the scientific importance of crying. Tears are important, episode 14, episode 11, sympathy versus empathy, learning the difference between the two. What does it mean to sympathize with someone? What does it mean to empathize with someone? How are they unique, or how are they connected rather? How are they different? Things about time, the misconception that you're supposed to constrict yourself to a certain time frame for grief. I talk about time in episode 12. I talk about time again in a different way in episode 17. I talk about the feelings of guilt that might start to overcome you when you start to feel a little better. You start to feel a little teeny bit less heavy, and then you feel guilty at the notion of moving forward with your life because you think it's a disservice to the memory of your loved one. Episode 98, maybe 20, is called Guilty Joy. I'm experiencing a little bit of joy now. Oh no, I'm not supposed to be doing this, or am I? I talk about the impact that grief has on children. Episode 16, for kids. So I hope that those out there, if you are dealing with the loss of a loved one, or you know someone who is dealing with the loss of a loved one, you will check out Grief Talks with Noel. There's an episode on there called Guys and Grief, rather. There are 3 men who courageously tell their story, because some people think that grieving is a woman thing. No, it is no respect of gender. It is important for men to grieve as well. Guys out there, hear me. You hear me, brothers? It's important for men to grieve as well. That thing will cause you to explode. We don't want you just blowing up, going crazy, attacking people, and nobody knows why. you've got to let it out as well. So episode 24, guys and grief. Again, I was at my brother's house in November of 2019 for Thanksgiving, and I'm standing there in his kitchen or so, and the episodes just started coming to me. And I knew that it was the Lord calling me to do this thing. I didn't want to. Has it been comfortable for me? You're right. It's been very painful, because with every episode, as I etched out the curriculum for each episode or the structure of each episode, I had to dig in my own emotions every time and figure out what I wanted to say to the people and what real life application I could put on there. I said all that to say that one of the episodes, episode 15, when we go back to tools and coping mechanisms, one of the most important things for you to do is something that you would think is completely automatic. But when you're in the pit of your grieving, you have to remind yourself to very simply, very intentionally breathe. Literally stop. Inhale, exhale, repeat. It slows down your heart rate when you breathe. And sometimes there's so many different things going on. There's so much happening, planning homegoings and restructuring of finances and life insurance policies, and people all are everywhere, and your family's fighting. Y'all gonna fight. And somebody's not gonna get along during this process. All this stuff is happening. It's so chaotic, you forget to breathe. And so that's coping mechanism, coping strategy number one. Breathe. Isolate time. Force yourself to stop, literally, and breathe. Other things that you can do while you're coping with grief: know your limits. Know exactly what it is you can handle. Again, this will come in time. I know that the third Sunday in June, I cannot go on social media. I can't see it, because I'm going to see nothing but Father's Day posts, and it's going to tear my heart to shreds. I know my limits. I know what I can handle. I know what I cannot handle at all. And in time, you will learn your limits. You'll learn where you can go. You'll learn movies that you can watch and that you can't watch. In time, you will learn these things. Let me speed this up. Cry when you need to. Episode 14, I talk about the scientific importance. There are hormones that are released when you cry. And that hormonal imbalance can cause all kinds of physical problems. Cry when you need to. Crying is important. On the contrary, laugh when you can. There's nothing wrong with laughing during this process. Laughing can help you cope when you can. If you feel like you can laugh, even if it's something mindless, laugh. Take your mind off of your pain for a little bit. Laugh when you can. Love on your family. They are going through this as well. It might be hitting them differently, but love on your family and let them love on you. Try not to push people away too much. There might be days when you feel like you don't want to be by people, and that's fine. But for the most part, you will gain strength by leaning on them, because they are going through this thing the same time that you are. Modify past traditions. There might be things that you used to do as a family, or things that you used to do as yourself, that you shared with your fallen loved one, but you can't do those anymore because they're too painful. Don't be afraid to modify those traditions, still keeping the memories alive, but changing them to ease the pain just a little. Talk about your fallen loved one. There is such a strong therapeutic quality in talking about things. That's why my channel is called Grief Talks with Noel, because the more you talk about something, the more you're able to start to work through it in your mind. You start to make sense of it the more that you talk about it. If you bottle it up, you never release it. You never let it go. You never start to work through it. And how in the world can you ever improve? Or how in the world can you ever get through things? How can you trudge through the mud of this thing if you don't talk about it? Talk about your pain. Talk about your fallen loved one. Tell funny stories. All that stuff helps. And the last one, I don't know if that was 7 or not. Same as the first one. Breathe. It's going to hurt. There are going to be things that you encounter every single day, things that you may not even realize that are there. Reminders might come out of nowhere. You might be minding your business, and that grief thing will sneak up on you out of nowhere. You'll see a commercial that'll remind you of your loved one, and you'll be bawling out of nowhere. It happens to me. Currently, I'm 2 years in, and that still happens to me. So again, you've got to remind yourself to breathe. Take the time. Self-care is important. Protect your peace. Don't let people around you who you know are toxic for your healing. Those are just some things that you can do to cope with the pain during the hardest time in your life.
Yes, 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 and yes again. We cannot say thank you enough for coming. I don't know how many times I can say it. I want to let Fabianna say something because
Like Andrea said, we can't thank you enough for coming on and just giving spoken word to people's heart from your pain, letting them know about grief, how to begin the healing process of not completely getting over their loved one, but just being able to still have joy and still remember them in the process. So again, we thank you. Continual prayers for you and Andrea in your grieving process. And sisters in Christ, we uplift you. We love you. Continue to do what God has called you to do, which is minister through Grief Talks with Noel and through Andrea Perry. So I think we have all the information in order to get on your YouTube channel. We just want to thank everybody for watching. I hope you've gotten something out of this. Please follow
Is it
her.
backwards?
Please go
No.
on YouTube for her. Very good. Grief Talks with Noel on YouTube. There you go. So we thank you and God bless you all. Have a great night. This is
Thank you so much for having me, ladies. Thank you.
you're
God bless you.
welcome.